welcome to Cooking Live with me, Jeni Wheeler. I'm super grateful all of you could join us this evening, and a huge shout out to one of my favorite community partners, the Hyannis Public Library, for partnering with us at the Family Table Collaborative to bring you programming like this, where we get to do live cooking, where hopefully you get to kind of maybe learn a few new things, you get to ask me questions, you get to experience a wider variety of food, kind of getting exposed to a wider variety of vegetables. And, you know, we do tend to like to have a little bit of fun along the way. So first and foremost, it's only Tuesday, but it is definitely 5 o'clock somewhere. If you want to take a quick second, go get yourself a drink, or whether you want water or juice or anything you want. However, 5 o'clock somewhere. So from Jim and I in my kitchen to you in yours, welcome to Live Cooking with me, Jeni Wheeler. Tonight is a jam-packed session, so we're just going to kind of get started. I had mentioned before we kind of started the video that I had put out a lot. What you're seeing here in front of me is not only all the ingredients I listed, but some I didn't. And the reason I did that is twofold. One, I want you to see that you really have the ability to add a lot of different things. It doesn't just have to be what I listed in this one recipe. Minestrone is a really broad term. And Tony at the library texted me when I sent her the recipe and was like, wait, doesn't minestrone have pasta? Well, a lot of times it does. I make mine with no pasta because my brand, Jeni's Joy, was originally a gluten-free food brand because my dad and my sister have to be gluten-free. Now, do they make gluten-free pasta? Yes, you could do that too. But to be honest, I stay away from as much processed as I can get. I prefer to use as many natural ingredients. So instead of pasta, I went with potatoes that are right here. So it's just a nice, easy sub. It gets you a little bit of starch. I also had a couple of you text me and say, my family is never going to touch this if it doesn't have meat in it. So here's the deal. Pretty easy. Put in some sausage. Like, sausage is great in this soup, but I chose to leave it vegetarian. But again, you can do ground pork. You could have done ground lamb. You can kind of do anything, whatever your preference is. And that's the cool thing about cooking. I want to debunk that it is necessarily hard, that you have to follow all these rules. Several of you on here know me. I'm very bad at following rules. So if that was required for what I do, I might not be so good at it. So I really want to kind of get you guys thinking a little bit outside of maybe what your comfort zone is and be like, oh, okay, wait, I can do all of these other things. The other thing I'm going to talk about is there's a lot of ingredients for this minestrone soup, which means you're going to have a lot of stuff left over. Now, could you go ahead and make a second minestrone? Absolutely. But I'm going to give you a couple suggestions for other things you might be able to use with these, like with your leftover ingredients as well. And so the mighty minestrone is first. The second thing we're going to do is the no power bowl. And I hope this brings a smile to all of your faces. But any of us living on Cape Cod know how often an awful lot of us can lose power and people freak out. And here's the deal. We all have a pantry. Everybody's pantries, I know, are like stocked. And I'm getting ready to do an additional cooking show where I go to somebody's house and cook from ingredients in their pantry. So stay tuned for that. That's going to be fun. But for that reason, people who lose power, it's like, oh my God, I have nothing to eat. What am I going to do? Oh my goodness. Well, this is something that I just kind of made up last year when I lost power at one point in time. And it seemed a good title to be a no power bowl because it gives you amazing nutrition. It's really, really tasty. And it requires almost no effort. So really, super easy. All right, so let's get started. First and foremost, well, just before we actually start, because you're all going to be amused with this. Anybody that knows me knows I tend to cook in significant volume for the collaborative, having just surpassed 97,000 meals into the community and our average output of meals is around 350. Cooking in small batches does not come naturally to me. So I loaned my mother my soup pot. And of course, when I'm used to cooking in a commercial kitchen, I have a 35-gallon soup kettle, or tilt skillet right now. And so the only pan, the largest pan I have at my house right now is this. So this is the challenge to me. I have no idea if I can do it or not. It's going to be, Jim's going to be really, really amused behind the scenes tonight, laughing at me trying to achieve this feat, because he joked before we started that I make my coffee in this size cup. So the idea of making soup in this is really almost comedic. So you might laugh, but I already have about like 2 additional pans this size, just in case I run over, because I'm destined to run over. Small is just not really my thing. So anyway, but here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna get started by getting some things chopped up, getting them sauteed a little bit so that we can add the water, add the bay leaves, and kind of get going. So is everyone, so first of all, if you have any questions whatsoever, feel free to put it in the chat. We're gonna leave time at the end if you want to actually talk with me live. But if you have any questions, Jim will pass them along to me. And, you know, again, anything and everything, feel free. There are no bad questions. And I want you to really get used to having all of this abundance of amazing produce at your fingertips for cooking. So it is so fun. Fun with Food is the name of my kids' cooking show. And it should be, honestly, that's what it should be all the time, fun with food. I don't actually have it queued up. Usually we start with a dance party, and that is kind of my style. However, you know, I won't make all of you dance. It is really fun to torture the kids to make all of them dance, but you know, you'll see that coming. It's definitely going to happen, because starting and ending with a dance party is just kind of my groove. So, all right, let's get started. So basically what you want to do when you're looking at making a soup, a lot of it is kind of layering. Now, if you don't layer, it's still okay. It's just that certain things kind of take longer to cook. And also certain things you want to actually almost like cook into the stock more, which means that you're going to cook them and they're going to degrade while you're boiling the water. And that's okay, because all of that nutrition and all of that flavor is getting added to the stock. And that's really a positive thing. So first and foremost, if you have not washed your hands, let's go ahead and do that. Let's wash our hands and get ready to cook. So you want to just make sure, you know, obviously when I'm in my kitchen, I am washing my hands every 3 seconds. I'm gloved if I'm serving the public, if it's anything that isn't being cooked after I touch it. And at home, it's just always good to make sure, just wash your hands. Tonight, we're using all vegetables. It's a little bit, I feel like, not quite as, you know, much of an issue with a cross-contamination, but it can still happen. So the better, you know, more hygiene you use, always the better with cooking. All right, so first and foremost, we're gonna start with onion. And again, because I have a small pan, I'm gonna try so hard to go smaller. We'll see how I do. So I told you that you wanted 2 onions. This is, again, there's not rules here. So if you're somebody who like understands that onion adds a lot of flavor, however, you're not a huge fan, my knife doesn't want to cut through that, then you can use a little bit less. I'm gonna go with 1. This is kind of a medium size onion. I'm gonna go with 1 onion. I'm gonna dice it up and drop it on the floor. Stuff like that happens, even to me. All right. Now I'm going to cut up another one. Now we'll go with a bigger one. So we're going to kind of dice it up. It doesn't matter if it's really, really, really a fine dice. We're actually going to get it started first So you're not going to, this is one of those things you're actually going to cook for the most part into the stock. So, all right, let's do this. So you peel it, get it all set up. If it happens to have any bruises or something, mine has a little bruise right here. I'm just going to cut that off. And I find it easiest to cut it in like a half moon. If you put your hands on the outside and you slice, that way your hands are never in the middle of the blade. You have no chance of hitting your finger if your fingers are always on the outside. Now this little tub, you're holding it together. You don't want to make sure your fingers are never near the blade. And basically, if you do it both ways, you get pieces this size. I'm going to go ahead and stick that. My pan is not on yet. And the only reason I don't have it on is I like to not use oil when I'm making my soups if I don't have to. It reduces the fat. And honestly, I don't feel like you need oil, particularly in a minestrone. So if we were doing something with meat, maybe we would need it. I'm actually gonna cut the second half of the one where I dropped the other half on the floor. So I want to make sure what I'm gonna end up doing is I'll probably spray the pan just a hair, or maybe not even. I'm gonna add a touch. Let's go ahead and add a half a cup of water, just so the onion doesn't stick. And then I'm going to go ahead and turn on to a medium high. So I'm just right now, I've got some diced onion, half a cup of water in the pan, turned the pan on to medium high, just to kind of start getting it cooked up. Okay. So then other things that are going into the stock that we want actually to cook off and, you know, kind of bring all the flavor out of, but you don't care if they remain really firm, because texture is a lot with soup, right? You want to have some things that are a little bit firmer, some things that are a little softer, so you feel like you have those different textures in your mouth. Things like that matter with food. So first and foremost, bay leaves. I'm a big fan of bay leaves in soup. So I'm going to go ahead. Now the pan, I like bay leaves in my soup. So I'm going to go ahead and throw in like 5. If you're using a slightly bigger pan, you can also use 5, but you can also add a couple more if you want. And then there are some people that actually only like to add like 2 or 3. So there's no right or wrong to that. But I do want it infused in the water from the get-go. So the next thing we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to take a couple of celery stalks. I think I said 3 in the recipe. Again, it doesn't mean there's a right or a wrong. I'm going to go ahead and rinse these. Just kind of get off. I rub my fingers kind of down through the middle. So anything that can come off is going to come off. Produce isn't designed to look perfect, guys. You know, we unfortunately are used to only getting something if it looks perfect. No bruises, no nothing. That's not the way produce grows. So pretty much anytime things start looking a little too perfect, they're likely you're either using chemicals or something. So you really want to make sure, you know, kind of get out of that mindset where it doesn't have to look perfect. We can always cut out a bruise. We can wash stuff off. So you want to make sure you've got good, healthy ingredients. A lot of what's on this table is organic. Not everyone cares. And, you know, that I leave that up to your personal preference. So all I did is I washed these off. I cut my 3 stalks. I cut the top off. I cut the bottom off. As you can see, that's not dirt, just part of the celery. So if you can, I like to stack them like this just to make it easier. So again, you're holding the 3 together. You're keeping your hands, your fingers outside of where you're going to use the knife. I'm going to put the knife right down the middle. Hold it as I go. And that way they're cut in half. And then I can dice it a little bit finer because it's halfway. So I'm just dicing fine, kind of fine dicing. These, you can see the size of the celery that I'm doing here. Again, there's not necessarily a right or a wrong. If you want yours a little bit bigger, go for it. Celery adds natural salt to the soup. Now I also took out my celery salt because I kind of prefer that if I don't feel like it has not quite enough flavor, I don't tend to add a ton of plain salt to too many things. Salt is something that we way overuse in this country. And so I prefer to not add just salt if I don't have to. So I'm going and adding these 3 stalks of celery. Okay. And we can give it a little stir. The water's still there. If your water is starting to evaporate, make sure that you add a little bit more in. You don't want anything to burn. You're just kind of trying to get this all pre-steamed before we add other things to it. And the next things we're going to add is cabbage. So I, in the recipe, had said, like, or in the ingredient list, I had said you could use a slaw mix. That's definitely a super easy way. If you don't want to dice the cabbage, if you don't want to get into it, a lot of times it gives you a little bit of red cabbage, some green cabbage. I happen to have a red cabbage. I also went out and bought a Napa cabbage. That's what this looks like. I'm just going to go ahead and siphon off a piece of it because for the pan size I'm using, if I cut this whole cabbage up, I'm definitely not going to make my goal of staying to a penny. Jim might get a huge kick out of this because I think he's betting against that I can do this to begin with. However, I'm going to do my best, people. I'm doing my best. So we're dicing up the cabbage. And if you have Napa cabbage, but if you have plain cabbage, you can do the same thing. You can cut it in half, do it as a half moon, and I'll switch over for a second to my red cabbage, which is like that. I'm doing red cabbage instead of green cabbage because I happen to have one. I like that red cabbage adds a little bit of color, that whole eat the rainbow thing. I was serious. And the reason for that is you get different nutrients out of different colored food. So if you tend to eat like a 5-year-old white diet, mac and cheese, chicken fingers, and pizza, you're not getting the expansive amount of nutrients that you really could be if we expand your palate a little bit. And I know that's hard. If you're not used to eating a wider variety and you're not used to cooking, it's hard to be like, oh, sure, let me sign up to make this thing with like 18 different ingredients. But if you could find out by making it that you actually like it, you're going to be more inclined to eat a wider variety of food. And honestly, that is good for everyone. There's no one in this country, well, I can't say no one. I don't know everybody, right? I know a lot of people, but not everybody. So if you even eat a lot of salads and stuff like that, likely you could still use more ingredients. So here's the deal. I have a nerve injury in my right elbow, so my knife skills with stuff like this is hard for me. So just keep that in mind. But I'm going to cut off a piece of my cabbage like that. Honestly, I would probably, if I wasn't using Napa cabbage, I would do about half. So I would kind of cut the head in half, put the flat side down, and we're going to do the same thing that we did with the onion. You're going to put your fingers on the outside. You're going to cut through it one way in slices, and then you're going to spin it, and you're going to cut the other way. And that's going to give you that dice, the small dice pieces. I have a random piece that fell off. So what you end up with is a really nice dice. And we're going to go ahead and add that to what we're kind of steaming over here. So I'm going to add both cabbages to make sure. First of all, I love cabbage. Cabbage is really good for you. It's really good for your digestion. It's great for your stomach. So for me, I add cabbage to almost every soup I make. And people are often perplexed by that. They're like, really? There's cabbage in there? And the answer is yes. And the reason is I add it to my stock. So often you don't actually see it, but it really adds a nice rounding to the flavor of my soups. So you'll find cabbage in almost every Jeni's Joy soup I make. Not everyone, but almost everyone. So now we've got the cabbage. And so I'm going to give this a little stir, and I know I'm going to need to add more water. So I'm going to probably go ahead now and add another cup of soup. So what we're doing is we're just getting this a little bit sauteed. We're kind of steaming it. And we're going to go ahead and add another cup of soup. A cup of soup. We're going to add a cup of water to our soup. There we go. So again, we're just getting this steamed up, ready to go. We have our bay leaves, we have our onion, we have our celery, and we have our cabbage. And we're just getting a nice little steam to it right now. Again, my stove is on medium high. I'm looking for it to come to a little bit of a rolling boil. So that's where we're at. All right, next up, here's the deal. There's all sorts of different things you can put in your minestrone, as I said. Because I chose to do potatoes, we're gonna go with potatoes next because they're kind of that thing that might take just about the longest. So what we did, I had told you a pound of potatoes. Again, it depends how many people you're cooking for. This bowl, this pan that I'm using, which seems like a little bit like a bowl to me because it's very small. And I'm really not kidding. I don't think I've cooked with a pan this small in years, even at my house. So I'm gonna go ahead and take out maybe 10 potatoes. And I've got the tiny potatoes. If you've got the big potatoes, you know, and you're only cooking for 4 people, maybe like if you've got the bigger red bliss, go with like 5 red bliss potatoes. But that's if they're bigger than this. For this size, I'm gonna go with maybe 10, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. I have 11. It's fine, close enough. See that, following rules. I even just said I'm gonna do 10 and then I'm doing 11. So it just says what it is. So we can go ahead and rinse these. If you have a colander available, I've got to take mine out. So I'm just gonna go ahead and do a quick rinse by hand. I, as a rule of thumb, don't tend to add my greens until I turn off my heat. So things like spinach, I tend to do absolute last. So we now have our potatoes rinsed. Are we all good? Good, we're good, we're good. Okay. So we're going to cut up the potatoes. Again, depending on what size you have, there's no right answer. You're gonna look and see if there's any blemishes on the potatoes. Now, I don't peel my potatoes. That's why I suggested a Yukon Gold or a Red Bliss. You actually get a lot of nutrients from the peel. So, but you should go through them and just make sure there are no blemishes. So this one has a blemish. So I'm actually gonna cut that blemish off and throw that away. And then I'm just checking all my other ones. If there's little divots or anything, you can cut them off. You don't have to cut out every little thing, but if there's anything, let's see, that looks pretty good. Looks pretty good. Looks pretty good. Now again, we're so used to everything looking like totally perfect, but you know what? That's not the way food grows. So we want to make sure we recognize that, you know, it really actually shouldn't look totally perfect. That's much more abnormal than normal. And we need to kind of get out of that mindset with regard to growing food because we need less pesticides and less preservatives and everything. So we want to make sure we get good, healthy, nutritious, delicious, real food. All right, so I am now cutting up my potatoes. Again, there isn't a right or a wrong. This is about the size I'm going with. That one seems a little big. And all I tend to go with is a bite size, because again, it's soup. So you're gonna be putting this in your mouth. When you're taking a spoon, if it's too big for something you would want to eat, make it a little smaller. So that's the rule of thumb. So for these, I'm kind of going with quarters. With the bigger ones, I would probably go with 8s. Now, if it's a bigger potato, let me take my biggest one, which isn't very big, but I'll pretend it's bigger. You can cut it in half. An easy way to do it is always, for a safer position, put a flat side down, And then again, fingers on the outside. And if you want to make smaller pieces, cut one way and then the other, and then you end up with smaller pieces. Okay. So again, not a right or a wrong. I'm only, because these are smaller, I'm only doing them in 4s. Some of these I'm going to end up doing in 8s. Because these would be some, like that one would be too big with 4. So I'm just cutting it one way, flipping it over, cutting the other, spinning it, and cutting it again. Always, if you are not super comfortable with a knife, put a flat side down. Always give yourself a flat side to work off of if you're not comfortable. So even though I'm doing it with the whole potato, if you're not comfortable, once you cut it in half, flat side down, and then do it from there. So don't let anything stress you out. This is supposed to be fun, super fun. That's why we're doing it. And to introduce you to all of this amazing produce that we have at our fingertips. And we're so lucky to be able to have that. So, all right, I'm almost there with my 11 baby potatoes. Perfect. Okay, and don't forget, if you have any questions or if I'm going too fast or if you need to know anything, just ask. This is why we're doing this, so we can all do it together, so we can all get more comfortable, and you can be like, wow, when you add all these ingredients together, they're amazing. So, you know, just make sure you're getting comfortable. All right, so I have now added my potatoes to my pan. And you can see my water's starting to turn a little bit reddish purple because of my purple cabbage. So I'm going to go ahead and give this a stir. And then we're going to add our can of diced tomatoes. Now, if you have plenty of tomatoes at your house that you want to use up, the benefit of soup is you can go ahead and add all of these different types of tomatoes. You can cut up any tomatoes you want. Doesn't matter if they're a little mushy. It's a great way to use up soup. But you can also take the easier route and go with, hey, let's go with a can of diced tomatoes. If you're somebody who likes a little bit of spice, do I have it out here? I might not. You can add one of the spicy tomato cans if you want to pick it up a little bit on that side. I'm going to go, I have a no salt added organic diced tomato. I'm going to go ahead and use that. And I'm not going to drain it. I actually want the juice. I'm going to put the juice right in there. So that gets added right into what we're doing here. And this is what you got. And now we're going to go ahead and we're going to add 2 more cups of water. So we did our tomatoes. So we now, to recap, we have our onion, we have our celery, we have our potatoes, we have our cabbage, and we have our tomatoes. We also have our bay leaves. So now we're going to go ahead and add 2 more cups of water. And that will get us cooking a nice little stock and a base for the rest of our soup. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to our carrots. There we go. You got a nice little soup going. There we go. All right. And basically what we did is we just brought the water up to just about over, see this? Just about over the top, like right at the top of where all the ingredients are. We just brought the water right up to the top. So there we go. Now I'm going to crank that up to high. We're going to get that boiling a little bit. And we're going to go to the next kind of densest food. And we've got 2 coming up. We've got both our carrots. Now I picked multicolored carrots because I'm obsessed with them. I love that they're so pretty. And to be honest, I don't tend to peel them. So I roast these a lot. But what I do is I give them a good scrub. I cut off the ends, cut off the greens. And then I keep the peel on these. You absolutely can peel them. Again, my most common thing that I do with my carrots is roast them. because I'm a big fan of roasted carrots. Funny enough, I've never been a fan of carrots in general until I found these little guys, these multicolored ones, and found out that I could roast them. And then ever since then, I'm kind of a fan. I'm kind of a fan of my multicolored carrots, particularly roasted. So I just went ahead and cut the tops and bottoms off. Now I'm going to rinse mine now. The other thing is, a lot of people like to get the pre-cut, not pre-cut, but you can actually get them pre-cut, but you also can get them either shredded if you're not opposed to a shred in your soup, but you also can get them that are already pre-peeled, right? The baby carrots. The only problem with most baby carrots is they've been bleach washed. I'm not a huge fan of that. I know it's a lot easier. I know it cuts time, and convenience is a huge deal with cooking, but I would rather actually either peel my own carrots or just roast them as is. But I want you to see how beautiful they are, because even the purple carrots have like a yellow center. So I love color in food. Food is beautiful. And so for me, this is like a perfect use of adding color. So it's just a gorgeous, gorgeous color. Now I'm giving them a little rinse. Like I said, I'm not peeling these because they have a very, very thin skin. So I'm just going to dice them up, make sure they're all clean, and I'm going to give them a little dice. And again, there's no right or wrong to how big they should be. It's all going in the soup. So it's whatever you're comfortable with for your bite size. I just love these multicolored carrots. So cool. So we're dicing them up. Now these were really tiny carrots, so I ended up just doing them all because I think I had 5 or 6 total. Now, if you're doing a big pan and you feel like, oh my goodness, Jenny, I have a whole bag of carrots. How many am I doing? If you've got big carrots, I would do maybe 3 because again, you have a lot of ingredients in this soup. You're getting a ton of different nutritional density from the different types of vegetables we're using. So you want to spread it around. And again, you're going to have a lot of things left over at the end because we're using so many different produce. So I'm going to encourage you actually roast a lot of these vegetables off. I tend to roast 2 huge trays. I mean, how pretty is that? You have all these awesome colors. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. So, and then we're going to go ahead and throw those in once you have them done. But I'm going to suggest you roast a lot of the vegetables off, and I can add others that you could roast. Cauliflower, broccoli. I brought out mushrooms. I didn't put those on the list. Some people love mushrooms and you can add them to minestrone, but you don't need to. But if you roast peppers, Brussels sprouts, there's all sorts of vegetables, but you can also roast things like radishes. I had a thing of radishes, so I wanted to bring them because I didn't list them as an ingredient. You don't need them for the no power bowl, but if you happen to have something like radish, it's a great thing to add. So, all right, now we have carrots, onions, celery, cabbage, bay leaves, our tomatoes. So we're on a roll here, and our potatoes. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to our bok choy. Now, I don't know how many of you have used bok choy. I told you cabbage is in almost every one of my soups. Bok choy is the other thing that I use in almost all of my soups. Now, a lot of people are like, I don't think I've ever had bok choy, or I don't think I've ever had bok choy not in Chinese food. So that's what people kind of are used to maybe seeing it if they know it at all. For me, it is one of my hands down favorite vegetables to work with soup. So again, I have a small pan. I'm not going to lie, I would usually tell you I would use the entire thing because I love me some bok choy. But, it's the whole confined space thing. So I'm taking just about half of it. Sometimes the bok choys you can get are huge. For me, usually I love that. But for this one, I tried to get the smaller one, but you're still gonna have some left. So I'm just gonna rinse that off, bring it back to the table, cut the base off. And again, this is what it looks like. It should be nice and white. And again, that doesn't mean it has to be perfect. It doesn't mean that it can't have any dimples in it. But usually with stuff like this, if you cut it, or if you're working with it and it has big brown spots or something, those are the spots you don't want to eat. Like if it has like a light brown running through it, that's the part that's starting to rot. So what I'm going to do, like I said, I don't like putting greens in. I'm going to cut the very top off, just the part that's really true green. And I'm going to set it aside in a bowl because I'm going to add that when I add my spinach. And then I'm going to take these pieces, I'm going to cut them right down the middle. Again, just to give me a smaller base. If you're comfortable with a knife, you can take a whole stack and kind of cut them in multiple directions so that you're shrinking it. It's up to you with your comfort level. You can also take one piece at a time and just cut it right down the middle till you feel like you have a small enough piece. Again, there's not necessarily a right or a wrong. It's all about size. Now, for me, I'm fairly comfortable, so I'm gonna bunch this together because it's a size that I can get my whole hand around. I'm putting it together and I'm dicing the whole stack. If you're not comfortable with that, and there's nothing wrong with that, what you can do is take one or two pieces and just put them down, lay them flat, because again, the flatter you go, the more easily things cut. So you can do one or two at a time, and you absolutely want the greens in it. Like I said, I cut the very top of the greens off just so we can add them later. But as you start getting things cut, you can go ahead and throw them in as well. Now my soup is at a rolling boil, so I'm actually going to turn my heat back down to medium high now that it's boiling. I'm putting in, and I'm seeing that my potatoes are starting to soak up some of that water. So I'm going to go ahead and add 2 more cups of water. My potatoes are trying to, soak up all that water. So we're going to go ahead and add 2 more cups. Excellent. Here we go. Give that a nice little stir. Some people like really thick soups. Some people like thinner soups. For minestrone, for me, I like to have a nice broth. So I like it to be a little bit on the thinner side. So, okay, I'm going to come back, finish cutting up my bok choy. And don't forget, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to write it in the chat. I will tell you that having vegetables roasted off makes your life so much easier, because for me, honestly, I use vegetables in every single meal I make. That's just who I am. I love them. There's a question.
Have you put any bouillon in the soup yet?
I have not put any bouillon in the soup yet. And the reason for that is because a lot of natural vegetables and natural ingredients have some salt in it. So I like to kind of taste it and then gauge how much salt is kind of coming out. Because even within celery, some celery is heartier, saltier, tastes saltier than others. So, all right, I'm mixing this up, and I'm going to need to add a little bit more water, and then actually bouillon is in fact coming next. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and add, because it is soaking it up pretty fast now that we had it up at a boil. I'm going to go ahead and add 1 more cup. Again, just bring it up nice up to the top of all our ingredients. Okay, so now The last ingredients I believe that I had on your list were beans, zucchini, yellow squash, spinach, and or kale. And then the different spices. So right now we're gonna go ahead. I have a Better Than Bouillon. It is my favorite bouillon. It's all I use in Jeni's Joy when I use bouillon. They have an outstanding, you can tell this jar is quite large. I get it at Costco, where it is much cheaper than anywhere else. Costco is not close to Cape Cod. And so I do it because I, have family up north, which is where I'm from. But also it's one of those things that, for me, I go through so much of it because of how I cook that I use it all the time. However, you can get it in the smaller containers at almost any of the grocery stores. This is the vegetarian. You could use the chicken as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and add about half a tablespoon. So that would be 1.5 teaspoons. Half a tablespoon, maybe a hair more. I'm gonna give that a little stir. I'm gonna crank it back up to high, just to bring it up to a boil, and then I'll turn it down a little bit again. And then once we get that in, we'll give it a taste. We'll give the broth a taste in another minute. I'm also gonna go ahead and add the adobo. Now, this is what a lot of you were asking me about. It's an inexpensive combination of spices that has become kind of a generic, all-encompassing spice. I use it for everything. People in my kitchen laugh at me that like I put it on my eggs, and I actually do. So, okay, so I just gave a little splash across the top. If it's a pan like my size, it's probably about a half to 1 teaspoon. And then I'm doing white pepper. And again, this, you're just gonna do a little pinch. I'm doing a little sprinkle over the top, depending on your spice, what you like for spice. You might want a little more, you might want a little less. You can always add spices, you can't take them out. So always go lighter, taste it, and then kind of see where you're at. So there we go. You have a nice look to our soup right now. So what we're gonna do is at this point in time, we're going to add I would add 2 cans for a pan my size. I'm gonna go ahead and add 2 cans of beans. You can add as many as you want. And again, there's no right or wrong. Things I have left on this table that I'm gonna add. I have chard or beet greens at the tops. I have a multicolored chard. I'm gonna cut up some of that. I'm not gonna add it, but I wanted to make sure that you could see it. I had a leek. Leek is a type of onion. It adds a beautiful flavor. So I brought that out just in case you happen to have one. This is what fresh spinach looks like. So this is the spinach I'm going to be adding. But like I said, I don't like to add the greens until I turn the heat off because you lose too much of the nutritional value. And all we have left is our zucchini and yellow squash after that. And I know you're going, all we have left, we've added tons and tons of vegetables. But that's why this soup has such a great flavor. All of those vegetables combine to give you a beautiful, beautiful flavor. It gives you a beautiful look because you have all the different colors in it. You just can't go wrong. So I have the 2 beans I think I already opened. Oh, and the lentils. That's the other thing. So we're going 2 beans and lentils. Now, I happen to have a can of green lentils, and it happens to have onions and bay leaf in it. So I went ahead and I'm going to use that. If you want to add lentils and you need to cook them, then I should have actually given you this direction ahead of time. But you can go ahead and cook them. I don't think that opened. I tried to open it before class to save me time. But you can go ahead and put them in a pan with a little bit of water, 2 parts water to 1 part lentil. And you can go ahead and add a touch of bouillon to it. And okay, thank you. go add a touch of bouillon to it. You can boil them off a little bit separately, just because we would have added them back when we added the potato if you need them to cook. If you have can, excuse me, if you have a can, it's not an issue. So I'm going to go ahead and add my can. And then I'm going to add my beans. Starting to get dicey here with my space. I'm definitely going to be pushing my luck here in a minute. So we're going to add the lentils. And again, you don't have to add lentils. It gives you a little extra protein. Now I brought out a can of black beans. I brought out a can of sofrito. Sofrito is used in a lot of different countries. It's kind of a combination of pepper, garlic, a whole different array of things. A lot of people, in a lot of countries, they put it on their eggs. They use it in almost everything. So it's also a kind of a quick side thing, a quick shortcut. Oh, yay, that worked. Okay, so I'm rinsing. I'm adding cannellini beans. I'm rinsing them, and for this, I do need to get out my colander. So I'm rinsing the cannellini beans, and then I'm going to add those to my soup. And then the other bean I'm going to add are kidney beans, red kidney beans. And again, there's no right or wrong for what beans you add. But again, beans give you add a lot to a dish. They can add a ton to a dish. Yep, I'm not going to make it, Jim. So close, people. I was doing so well. I'm going to have to split it and then add the rest into the 2 pans. But I was doing such a good job. So as you can see, I'm getting close to the top of my pan. So when I add my next thing of beans, I'm going to actually need to split this before I do that. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now to give myself a little extra space. I tried. I gave it a good go, people. I really tried. Look, love is always my secret ingredient. So I'm going to use my love mug to transfer some of this soup. I have a ladle, but this is faster. This way I get some of the broth first, and then I'll use the ladle to transfer some of the rest. Find myself a little more space. Jeesh. I did my best. It was close. It was really close. All right. So now, because I've got it in 2 separate pans because I didn't have enough room, I'm going to actually turn that one on medium high. This one is boiling. I'm going to go ahead and add 2 more cups. And if you're still in 1 pan, you still want to go ahead and add 2 more cups, because the beans will also, like the potatoes, they'll soak in a little bit of that, water. And so we can always add as we go. We want to make sure we've got that great consistency. And like I said, everybody is different. I like some real broth with my minestrone. If you want it more like hearty, like stew-like, you can use less broth. That's totally fine. There's no right or wrong. So we've got that. So then my last set of beans are the kidney beans. So go ahead and rinse those. And again, you can go with 1 can of beans. You could go with black beans. You could go with chickpeas. I have all of those out on the table. So there's no right or wrong to this. It's all whatever you want to add. But I will say, if you think you don't like beans, give them a chance, because honestly, beans add a whole lot of nutrition, They can add a whole lot of creaminess, believe it or not, because their texture is kind of creamy when you're eating it. So for me, the more beans, the better. And definitely, if you're vegetarian or vegan, beans can add a combination of beans and rice actually give you a complete protein. So it's actually really good if you're vegetarian or vegan when you get kind of beans and rice. So in this, we don't have rice. We actually have potatoes as the starch. Again, it just really adds a lot of flavor. So now we're gonna go ahead. We have our zucchini and we have our yellow squash. I'm gonna cut out this one little piece because that's the only piece that looks a little scarred. Everything, that's totally fine. If it bothers you, cut it out. Nothing on the zucchini at all, just those two little pieces on the yellow squash. Again, I like to rinse all of my produce before I use it. And that's just to make sure if there's any pesticides, if there's anything, anyone's touched it. I like to just kind of give it a good rinse. We know we're boiling it anyway, but doesn't hurt. Again, always err on the side of safer, better with food handling, washing your hands, all of that stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this. My spinach is in the way of my cutting board. So, and again, give yourself a flat surface. My squash is a little bit thick, so I'm going to cut it in thirds and then cut it in pieces this way. Again, put it over to give you a little leverage so it doesn't tip on you. This one seemed like it needed to be in fourths, so I'm just cutting. Again, there's no right or wrong, whatever size you're comfortable with. The larger the size, the longer it will take to cook. So we're gonna go ahead and get that in there. And then as soon as we get the zucchini, the greens are gonna be the last thing to get added. So, and again, we're not gonna add those until we're totally done. So we're gonna do a quick, we're gonna let this boil for a couple more minutes. We're gonna do a quick, no power bowl. And then dinner will be served. So, all right, so then, and you know what? The other thing about this, guys, is this soup freezes beautifully. So the benefit of doing a soup like this and doing a big pan of it is that you'll also have it. If you don't eat it all, see, my knife got away from me. I don't have great dexterity in my right hand anymore. So basically, you'll have it. If it's frozen, you'll have it for a later date. And there's nothing better than cooking once and having several meals. Is there any questions?
Jane, do you drain this soup at all?
I do not drain the soup. Nope. To me, that's what that broth is all about, is you get all of that nutrition from all of the vegetables cooking in that broth. So for me, instead of draining it, if I was going to drain it, the only version of draining would be for me to put it in a cup and drink it. Because you can't get healthier than something like this. With all of these vegetables in it, it's so good for you. So good for you. So even if you have kind of an upset stomach, you're not feeling great, you know, honestly, one of the best things you can do is eat really good food. But if you can't digest a lot, you're not feeling great, the best thing to have is really good broth. And that's actually why they talk about like chicken stock and stuff like that, is because you get all that nutrition transferred into the broth if you cook it with all of these great ingredients. So for me, absolutely not. I do not drain it. I love the broth. I do strain the beans. I strain and rinse the beans. So, okay, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take a little bit, because we had all of this cooking down a little bit, and now all we need to do is let it kind of finish off and we'll add our greens. But I want to taste to see where the flavor is at, because we could need a little bit more bouillon, right? We could need a little bit more bouillon. We could need a little bit more adobo. So okay, so it's a little light on flavor, which I thought it would be. Now we've been adding water. So I'm going to go ahead and take, and you can pretend I'm not using two pans, but you know, whatever. I'm going to go ahead and add 1 heaping teaspoon to my big pan, my bigger pan, my very micro tiny big pan that I'm working with. Add 1 teaspoon. And then on this one, I'm going to add like about a half a teaspoon. So if you're working with a big pan, an actual big pan, some sort of a soup pan, lobster pot, that type of thing, then you probably want to go ahead and add about 2 teaspoons. But if you feel like it has enough flavor for you, again, because all of us are different, go ahead and add a little less. Now, like I mentioned, I'm obsessed with adobo. So I'm going to go ahead and add some of that to each one. Gives a nice flavor. Give that a little mix. Okay. Give my other pan a little mix. Anyone that knows me knows this is just about right. It's like I tried so hard. Okay, so the last thing we have for that is the greens. And again, I'm gonna set those aside for a quick minute and we'll do a quick check on that. I think we went through all of our ingredients. We in fact did, yay, except parsley. I didn't have fresh parsley. Funny enough, they always have it and didn't have any. If you have it, again, you can add it now, or you can wait and add it when you add the greens. But for our no power bowl, I'm telling you, this came up because of losing power here. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab a bowl. This one says grateful. I'm a big mantra person. I have things around me all the time. Like measure your life in love. The secret ingredient is always love. You know me, my secret ingredient is always love. So this bowl might not be quite big enough actually. So we're gonna go with a slightly larger one. So this came about because I lost power and I was like, okay, what am I eating? What am I doing? And I had an avocado. I had some tomatoes. I had some red onion. You could also use white onion, or you could leave out onion if you don't like it. I had fresh cilantro, which I love. I had fresh lime. I had chickpeas. I also pulled out, you can add corn. You can make this up. Like there's nothing about this. So I'm using my chickpeas first. I'm gonna go ahead and rinse them. Now I take that back. I don't usually rinse my chickpeas. I just drain them. And I'm not gonna lie, I eat chickpeas like candy. Like I love chickpeas. Love them. I roast them. I eat them out of a can. Some people probably think it's kind of weird, but I love chickpeas. So I'm gonna go ahead and put my chickpeas in. Now, depending on what type of tomatoes you have, you can use canned tomatoes. You can use fresh tomatoes, baby tomatoes. I kind of had them all, so I figured I would just showcase. I happen to have a thing of fresh radishes, so I went ahead and pulled those out because you could dice up some fresh radish. If you've never had radish, it has a little bit of a peppery taste and it has a really beautiful crunch. So if you're a texture person, radish is an awesome thing to add to things because you really can get a great crunch, but they're also super tasty if you roast them. So you can't go wrong. I also happen to have some watercress in my fridge, so I took that out. You can always add greens if you have some, but something like this was in my pantry. And again, a no power bowl means you're adding a ton of nutrition just from things that don't have to be refrigerated. They're coming out of your pantry. This is what we do, right? It doesn't have to be boring. Like it doesn't have to be hard. It can be super delicious and nutritious and super easy. So this actually is fried eggplant and peppers. And so this is something that would be beautiful in a salad. It's not listed. I didn't even realize I had it in my pantry, but I figured I'd pull it out because this is the type of thing that's perfect. And this is what happens when you have a pantry. Stuff gets buried. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut up a little bit of red onion. And again, I like red onion. Actually, I love red onion. It's a little bit of color, but it also is a hair milder, I find, than a white onion. So again, personal preference. I definitely know some people that aren't huge fans of onion. Onion adds a ton of flavor. So I'm gonna add a little bit of red onion. Because I said fresh cilantro. Half of the world thinks cilantro tastes like soap. If you're that half, don't use it. I'm the half that loves it and adds it to my eggs. Literally, my fresh eggs are always coated in fresh cilantro. I grew up with my grandmother doing that, and I love it. So I'm going to just take the whole bunch. I'm taking the top right off of it, cutting off the bottom. All you have is the leaves. And I'm doing a dice. Now, again, you can add just a tiny bit if you want just a little bit of flavor. Or, like me, if you love cilantro, you can add the whole bunch. I'm going to go ahead and add that. So now we have our cilantro, our chickpeas, our red onion. We have tomatoes. I'm going to go ahead and cut up some of the baby tomatoes I have. They're running away from me. And again, part of the reason I like multicolor is just because they're multicolor. I love to get that visual of adding so many colors to my meal. So I'm just cutting up the couple of different colors and adding those. Now, you don't have to cut these. If you're working with baby tomatoes, you totally can leave them whole. I'm just cutting them so they're a little bit really truly bite size. Adding those. And then right now, avocados are ridiculously expensive. So, that went sideways on me. But you're looking to get a ripe avocado, easier to cut it all the way around. And then the easiest way to get it out is twist it. And that's how the pit comes out, just like that. Gives you that. Now, if you have a really sharp knife, you can, if you're not comfortable with a knife, don't do this, but you can literally do this into the pit, twist it, and that's how you get a whole pit to come out. But again, only do what you're comfortable with. The other way to do it would be to take a spoon and kind of go around it. So one of those ways, whichever you're more comfortable with. Now, you can either scoop it out, just score it, and then scoop it so it breaks up into pieces. You never want to go all the way through. You're holding it. So if you put your knife through, it's into your palm. So you want to be real careful with that. And an easy way to do it is also put it down on the counter and do it when you're not holding it. I know exactly where my knife is at all times. And even I've caught myself not doing this, but it's easy to have, and it's easy to have it. So then we're going to use a spoon to get this out. And we're just going to go ahead and throw that right in our no power bowl. And I'll show that to you in 1 second once I get this scooped out. I'm going to go ahead and sprinkle this. I had a runaway piece of avocado. All right, then I'm going to go ahead and sprinkle this with some adobo. I'm going to go ahead and sprinkle it with a little bit of black pepper. I had said, let's grab a lime. The easiest way to do a lime is to roll it. I don't want to roll it on my glass cutting board, but you want to roll the lime just to kind of, it helps release the pulp inside. It helps to juice it. We're going to go ahead, cut it in half. Some people like cutting it lengthwise. Some people like cutting it across. To be perfectly honest, whatever you prefer is fine by me. And if you don't have a fresh lime, I always, because I love lime juice, I carry real lime, and I realize that this is the huge size, but I also have a small size for most normal people's kitchens. I love lime juice. I use lime and lemon in my dressings constantly. I don't think you need to add oil to this because we've got avocado in that has a natural, really good fat. If, in fact, you don't have avocado in it and you feel like it needs a little bit of smooth cream, you can add a little bit of avocado oil or olive oil or whatever you have. It's not going to need a ton though. So I went ahead and added a solid amount of lime juice. And then I'm going to give it a mix because I'm not sure if I'm going to want salt or not. Sometimes a little bit of salt goes a long way. I did not store my avocados through all the way, but a little bit of salt goes a long way. And that's the benefit to salt. If you use it in small amounts, it's not so bad. Unfortunately, our country uses a lot of salt in a lot of things. So there you have it. So now the best part is let's taste it, right? Let's see if we think it needs a little salt. God, so good. For me, it does not need salt. For you, it might. Again, there's no right or wrong. So that is done. Let's go back and check our minestrone. All we're checking for right now is we're checking for flavor. And we're checking to see if our potatoes are done. Because those are going to be the ones that may or may not be quite finished. But they should be pretty close. I'm taking one of my bigger pieces of potato because that's going to be a good check. And I'm gonna blow on it because it's hot. So potatoes done, which means our soup is done cooking. We can taste the broth. I'm going to turn off my burners. We're going to come back and cut up the last thing, which is the greens. Now, if you bought bagged spinach or bagged baby kale, you don't have to wash it usually. Usually on the packaging, it says triple washed. If that's the case, you do not have to wash it. I tend to wash everything. This is actually fresh spinach, so I wanted to go ahead and give it a good little, let me get all of this stuff out of the way. All the things. Okay. And I'm just going to cut the top off. Oh, I forgot that I have my avocado stem in there. I'm going to cut the top off of these spinach. And I'm going to remind myself that I actually have the top of the baby bok choy. And what the easiest thing to do is if you bunch up spinach or kale or any greens you have, you can kind of roll it all up together and then chop through it and then gather it up again. Bunch it up, chop through it. Basically what you're trying to make sure you do, and then you can chop the other direction. So once it gets like to a level of dice, you can chop it one way and then turn your knife and chop it the other way. That's going to give you a dice on the leaf. And then I always kind of gather it back up and do it again just to make sure I haven't missed any. And then I'm going to go ahead, toss this in, give it a little stir, and we're going to taste it one more time. My broth tasted amazing, so I think it's good to go on my side. But again, like I said before, there's no right or wrong. So we're going to give this a little toss. All I'm looking to do is wilt my greens. I don't actually want them to cook per se. I want them wilted so they retain some of that nutritional value. So now give it a little stir. Go back. And now I'm just going after the broth because I want to know if my broth. Oh my goodness. So good. So now you have mighty minestrone and no power bowl. You cannot get healthier, more nutritious, more delicious than this. And like I said, if you come from a family that has to have meat, no problem. Cook off some sausage, add it to that minestrone. It's going to be divine. But for me, this is a beautiful soup. It's good for any time of year. It has a thinner broth. You can make it more broth laden or less broth laden based on what you want. You can add pasta. You can add any vegetables you want. And a no power bowl, again, all stuff that was just sitting around one day when I had no power. Delicious, so much vibrancy and flavor. So again, food doesn't have to be boring. It doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be hard, but you should always use love as your secret ingredient because it makes all food better. I want to thank you guys for joining me. I want to see if there's any questions before we close out this night. I know this is the first time we took the entire hour and 15 minutes. We started a little bit late, but I thank you guys for joining me. If you have any questions, and I'm going to encourage, like we did last time, if there's something you'd like to see me cook with you, go ahead and email us, reach out to us, put it in the chat, because that's how the soup happens. Somebody said, I want Jeni to do one of her Jeni's Joy soups. So here you have it, my mighty minestrone. There's plenty more, but whereas we're going into summer, it's kind of a tough thing, soup. But this is one that lasts all year round. Like I said, it freezes beautifully, and you get to have so many ingredients. And like I said, saute up some of these, put them in an omelet. They make an awesome frittata. What is that? All you can do is beat some eggs, add some cream to it. Heavy cream is the lowest amount of sugar you're going to get in any dairy. I know people don't realize that. So if you add a little bit of a heavy cream to eggs, you get almost like an egg custard, which makes a beautiful frittata with all sorts of vegetables in it. All of these vegetables are beautiful in a frittata. You also can roast off a ton of these vegetables. Having roasted vegetables in your fridge is going to lessen your chance of grabbing crap food. You're going to go towards something that's nutritious and delicious because it actually tastes good to you. It actually tastes good and is good for you. And it also reduces the amount of time for anything you're going to make if you already have the vegetables roasted off.
What kind of container would you freeze this in?
So I would freeze this in, you can actually freeze it in, first, you would cool it first. So because you never want to put a hot item in a glass dish and put it in the freezer. It will crack it. So you don't want to do that. You want to cool the soup first. And then if you want to use it, you can use glass. And a lot of people are comfortable with the plastic quart containers. And if you're comfortable with using plastic, that's an easy way to freeze it off. At the Collaborative, I think I have an idea. You can put them in containers like this. These are microwavable. I'm not a huge plastic fan. I'm trying to get away from it. But if you have some available to you, that makes it easy. The other thing is you can also, if you want to freeze it in individual size containers, you can put it in something like this. Literally a bowl. You put the soup up to a little bit, like right below the line, because all liquid expands a little bit when it freezes. So don't fill it all the way to the top because it's going to pop the cover, but fill it up to the line inside. And now if you freeze it like this with the cover on top, you can grab and go from your own freezer with a nutritious and delicious meal to take to lunch for lunch to work with you. I mean, it doesn't get any healthier than that. And it doesn't get any easier than that because it's already made. It's already made. So you can just grab it. You can defrost over the course of the day, put it in the microwave, and you're good to go. And you know what you're getting. No junk in that. So much nutrition. Any other questions, Jim? Okay, you guys, this was so much fun. I hope you learned a few things. I hope you enjoyed your time with me. I know I enjoyed my time with you. You're going to have delicious mighty minestrone soup and a and this is a beautiful summer salad, by the way, because that lime adds just the right type of zest, has a beautiful summery flavor to it. To me, this type of thing, brings me right to where we are right now, kicking off summer on Cape Cod. So from me to you, love is always my secret ingredient, guys. Thank you for joining us for live cooking with me, Jeni Wheeler. I can't wait to see you back here next time. Enjoy your evening, guys, and enjoy the food.